or emphasized in the adoption when it comes back to us? Let's do it. Committee's okay with that?
Yeah, a pilot program concept for determining what are the actual GHG savings makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Auditing.
Yeah. Okay. All right, let's go on to one of my favorite subjects.
I've been looking forward to this one all day.
Just all day?
This is a request for 38 permanent positions to carry out preliminary design activities for components of what we refer to as the Delta Habitat Conservation and Conveyance Program. Essentially, if California Water Fix is approved and permitted, this would be the department's program to begin design of those facilities. There's no funding request. The positions would be supported with state water project funds. And I would just say that we certainly understand the logic in waiting to consider approval of this position authority ahead of completion of the planning of the program as described in today's agenda. But we are compelled to make this request consistent with the annual budget cycle simply because if we do get an approved project, the delays associated with waiting for the next year to roll around could prove very expensive to the folks that would pay for this project. Since we prepared this proposal for the governor's budget, our schedule has once again been extended. And our current schedule, I believe we provided some detail to the committee that I won't go into here, but we would expect that the CEQA and NEPA processes for California Water Fix would be completed in the fall of this year. However, our water rights process before the State Water Resources Control Board will likely extend into late 2017. So we acknowledge that our need for these positions in this budget year is certainly less critical than when we initially made the proposal. We had a similar discussion in our Assembly budget hearing where I requested that the subcommittee hold the item open such that we could the administration could bring forward a revised request for a reduced number of positions, and with your indulgence, I would make the same request of this subcommittee.
Did that request go to the Assembly? All right, we're looking at, I'm sure there are a lot of questions, certainly.
I'm just going to sit back and enjoy your discussion of this with Director Cowan.
Yes, well, I just want to make sure what the recommendation is before we move forward. We are tracking the Assembly Budget Committee's recommendation, which is in our staff report, and the recommendation is to track that and agree with that, which would be to deny the proposal to make the positions permanent and extend that 4 positions for 2 years. Now, you're saying, Director Cowan, that you have a revised proposal in terms of timing or the number of positions or what?
We are currently working with the Assembly subcommittee on a revised proposal and just in the discussion phase at this point, but we would expect to come forward with a request for a reduced number of permanent positions this year.
Okay.
The Assembly subcommittee, Madam Chair, did end up holding this item open when they heard it. They did not vote to deny.
All right.
Madam Chair, I would suggest that the Senate position would be that we would certainly be interested in a very significant reduction in those numbers of permanent positions. At least that's my position.
All right. Well, we're tracking the Assembly position, so I think holding it open is probably in deference to the department. Yeah, sure. Come forward with another proposal. We'll take a look at that then. I have committee members, any questions, Fran? All right. You know, I want to focus on Water Fix, and I want to focus on the costs. And I'd like to just ask you a couple questions. It has always been alleged that the Water Fix will be paid for by the contractors. So my question to you really has to do with how those expenditures that take place within the state on behalf of the contractors, how that is tracked. And I'm thinking of the various processes and people involved in the state who process, who analyze, who do all of that. So I assume all of that is tracked how and where.
We have a special unit of very talented people. The acronym is SWAPO, State Water Project Analysis Office, within the Department of Water Resources, that essentially administers our water supply contracts for the State Water Project. And those contracts are extensive. They've been amended, of course, many times over the years. But we have individual contracts with each of our 29 water contractors. And in those contracts, we delineate what the water supply benefits would be and how costs would be allocated to each of the individual water contractors. We've implemented those contracts now for over 50 years. It's always been on a beneficiary pays basis. Certainly, the individual water contractors are very interested to make sure they're not paying any additional costs that should be allocated to someone else, so they help us keep track of very diligently of how costs are allocated. So essentially, it's administration of our State Water Project contracts that give us the assurance that we're assigning the right cost to the right people.
Is there any legislative oversight over any of those materials?
The one provision that I will recall immediately, first of all, certainly the water supply contracts are all subject to the original authorizing legislation, the Burns-Porter Act and the Central Valley Project Improvement Act, which obviously go way back. We do have a provision in statute that I'm aware of that requires us to request a hearing when we substantially extend or amend our water supply contracts. So to the extent that we pursue California Water Fix, I think it's safe to say that will require some sort of contract amendment and extension. And at that time, we would be requesting the legislature to hold oversight hearings on those proposals.
All right. When we look at the willingness of the contractors to move forward with the water fix, there have been some, at least public concerns raised in particular about the Westlands Water District, Santa Clara, having changes, and you were there, so you heard the conversation. What assurances do you have, or should you have, that you're going to have partners that are going to step forward and pay for the cost of the tunnels, basically, the water fix?
Well, I have no assurances at this point.
Are you requesting assurances in writing? Are you?
As we complete the planning process, we will have to get to that point. We'll have to have financial commitments in order to move forward. So, this has been the careful balance over the last 8 years or longer of this planning process, trying to establish just what the benefits would be, what the costs would be, such that each individual state or federal water contractor can make their own business case decision as to whether or not they want to proceed. That's still the course we're on. Obviously, we have not completed our ESA consultations. We've not completed our NEPA-CEQA compliance. We've not completed our State Water Project, the State Water Resources Control Board change in point of diversion petition process. So all of those regulatory processes are outstanding. As we move through those processes and complete some and can see the end of the tunnel on others, no pun intended.
That's a
Sorry.
bad metaphor.
The costs and benefits associated that each individual contractor would be expected to receive and pay will become clear. I'm expecting that to happen this year. I don't think that we have the stamina or endurance to continue this planning process. We've exhausted the $240 million that the state and federal contractors have put up towards the planning process to this point. So we are at that moment of truth where each individual contractor will have to make their own decisions, and then we will have to deliberately decide if we have critical mass to move forward. And that's all, of course, assuming that the regulatory processes go forward as we would hope, and that we reach the appropriate decisions through the NEPA and CEQA processes.
I appreciate the difficulty of that, but it takes an enormous amount of energy and time of state personnel in the State Department of Water Resources to process this. I want to make sure that the contractors are paying for that time and effort processing, and does that include the processing of the point of diversion change at the board, all of that is kept, I'll ask the State Water Board when they're here, but I assume all of that is kept track of and charged to the contractors as well?
Well, the petition being prepared and presented by the Department of Water Resources and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, we are each paying our own costs associated with developing the petition and presenting the petition. Like all other water rights holders in California, we pay fees to the State Water Resources Control Board to maintain our water rights and in association with petitions that we bring forward. So we are paying fees to the State Board for their activities associated with the petition.
And those fees come from the contractors ultimately?
Correct.
All right, thank you. Question about the public advertising or public information campaigns. You know, the YouTube films that were put together for the governor's state of the state. Who pays for that?
The particular video that I think you're referring to that was associated with the governor's State of the State address was paid for by an outside group. So I'm not familiar with what specific funding they used to do that. It wasn't a state entity. It wasn't within my budget.
Well, I'm curious about it because it had the insignia of the Natural Resources Agency and I think Fish and Wildlife, I'm not sure if it had DWR, that really implied that it was a public announcement, essentially. If it's paid for by an outside group, it should have said that. I didn't see that. Don't you think?
I didn't produce the video, Secretary, Chair Wolk, so I can't speak to its production.
Campaign, campaign. You have to say who paid for it usually. Anyway, one other question.
All I can report is and testify to is that I didn't pay for it.
One other question. I know you're enjoying this. Contra Costa Water District, we received their terms of the settlement. Briefly, just curious, in it, it seems as if the agreement includes a number of things, but DWR would bear all the costs of constructing the new interconnection facilities and conveying the water to CCWD. Where's the water? Where's the money? And where's the money coming from?
The money would be associated with the California Water Fix project. So any funds pursuant to this agreement would be assigned to the same folks that would pay for the California Water Fix.
All right, that would be the contractors.
Yes.
All right.
That would actually be the rate.
And the ratepayers, as my colleague Senator Pavley reminds me all the time, and I should say that, make that clear.
It sounds free when you say contractors.
It does.
But there's
All right, I have no further questions. This is to be, the recommendation will be to hold this open as per the request of the director. So we will have we will have public comment on that in when we take the actual action. All right, that wasn't so bad, was it? All right, let's move on to the Delta Stewardship Council. I saw Patrick Johnston here, and I welcome Jessica Peterson, the Executive Director, as well. We have issue 1. The recommendation is to approve as proposed. Would you like to introduce it, Mr. Chair?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. We're before you for the budget of the Delta Stewardship Council. You're familiar with it. It's a small budget with a small increase devoted to science and updating the Delta Plan, which was authorized in legislation in 2009.
And I just want to clarify, none of the funding, we no longer have a BDCP, so none of the funding is going to complete that BDCP water fix or incorporate the water fix into the Delta Plan.
That's
was
correct.
An unfortunate error.
Right, and I think your staff report clarifies the situation, which is that the Delta Plan essentially deferred because the legislature instructed us to defer to what was then a plan, BDCP, to have a conveyance system that would eventually be made part of the Delta plan. When that went away, then the Delta plan, which we finalized and approved in 2013, was required really to update on conveyance and also storage and operations. And that's what, in part, this budget will do, our Delta plan. We were not going to, while BDCP was active, essentially compete with it by developing any kind of a
We've lost the mic.
a judging and reviewing, but not at this stage, certainly doing more than consultation, as we do with anyone, any public agency that has a project that affects the Delta. Our staff engages prospectively with them so that agencies would hopefully comply with the Delta plan and with state law.
All right. Are there questions of the chair? Yes, of that chair.
Senator Johnson, we were gracious to come to the office and chat a little bit. Kind of overreaching all of this for me, it's perplexing. And I had the privilege of representing North Delta and some of Central Delta for a number of years. The Cal Fed came along after I was no longer representing the Delta, but we spent a lot of money in the Delta. I'd say billions. And I hear nothing yet but gloom and doom about the Delta. Have we had any measurables and studies that have shown that those billions have gone towards any great progress to save the Delta? Because I hear nothing but gloom and doom. Has anything concluded positive that we've done?
I recall us meeting in the Delta with constituents when we both represented the area, an area now represented by Senator Walk. I'm going to ask Jessica Pearson to respond specifically, but one of the things you put in your law and that is in the Delta plan that we have worked on and are updating now is performance standards so that you and the public can look over a wide range of areas and see, well, where have we made progress and where have we come up short and what should be our priorities?
I think that's exactly right, is The Delta Stewardship Council, based on the provisions of the Reform Act, now has higher standards than ever before to be accountable to the actions that are taken in the Delta and to report on those trends and to be more specific than we've been in the past. I'm sure that there are specific studies that could track to some of the past CalFed investments, particularly in the upper region that you represent, and I'd be happy to follow up with you on those specifics.
Well, let me say that I am just manifestly skeptical. So as we would entertain whatever we're going to consider here, I think it's 2.1 million. I mean, it's a little bit. And the 2.5 million for the next 2 years for the Delta plan, you know, that's kind of peanuts compared to what has been poured in through CalFed. But to the ledge analyst's point a moment ago that we have some kind of absolute measurable requirements, I'm not comforted to say now we're doing some new things, because it appears we've squandered an awful lot of money already. And it's time to start now with some concrete requirements that certain information be reported to us. So we'd like to work with you, or I would with the committee, to ensure that whatever we expend prospectively have measurables reportable on given deadlines to the legislature of what that money is being spent on, and then what it is achieving, okay?
I support the Vice Chair in that suggestion. There were specifics in the Delta Reform Act about what should emerge from this, and now that there's been a change in the BDCP and in the dual goals sort of being separated by this administration, I think it's important to have measurables while the money keeps pouring in. It's a good idea. But did you have comments?
Maybe these are on. Just to be sure you're clear on the action before you, there are really two proposals. One is, as was mentioned, 1.45 million for the next 2 years to update the plan, but the other is 2.1 million annually for science and for scientific reports. And we'd recommend approval of both, but in particular, that could give you some of the information you're hoping for about current conditions in the Delta, what's causing those conditions, and perhaps some recommendations for actions to improve them.
But I would suggest the legislature should guide that, what we want, not the scientists. The vicissitudes of science has been interesting. I remember Dr. Trask in 2009 in meetings that were coming up with a new Delta plan telling us we needed more saline water up the Delta to save the Delta. I can't tell you how astounded I was at his observation that we needed more saline water. I'd never heard that before. So,
well, the Delta Stewardship Council should speak to this, not me, but they do have a lead scientist on staff, and I'm sure they'd be happy to bring him in, and he's quite impressive in terms of his resume, and I think he helps guide some of these decisions, so that could help get at some of the information you're interested in.
All right, thank you. All right, the recommendation is to approve as proposed. Is there any public comment on this item? Come forward. Welcome. We're back on.
Afternoon, Rosie Thompson with Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. We're in support of the 1.5 million that's directed for the science, basically echoing the LAO's comments and support. So again, Metropolitan Water District in support.
All right, thank you. All right, is there a motion? Or would you prefer?
make the motion, but at this point, until I'm comfortable with language of accountability, I'm going to be a no vote, but I'll make the motion.
Thank you very much. All right, it has been moved. Please call the roll.
Senators Wolf?
Aye.
Senator Nielsen? No. Senator Pavley?
All right, it is 1-1. We will leave that open for the absent member. All right, thank you very much.
Chair, thank you.
All right, let's hear from the Delta Protection Commission. Welcome, Eric Fink, who is the Executive Director. Welcome.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair, Senator Nielsen. Our request is a simple one. It's to update a portion of the Economic Sustainability Plan, which was called for in the Delta Reform Act. The Commission completed its initial Economic Sustainability Plan in 2012. statute requires it to be updated in 2016. Our proposal is merely to, for a small augmentation to enable us to focus in on the agricultural components of the economic sustainability plan, recognizing that agriculture is the predominant economic driver within the Delta region. This would enable us to undergo the work, not to complete it in 2016, but to have it pretty well queued up for completion by the end of 2017.
Eric, you heard that the schedule and the timeline for WaterFix is changing. How are you all managing to, or planning to keep up with the changing plans and the effect on the agricultural economic sustainability of the Delta, which is your charge?
Right. Well, the Commission's taken an active role in evaluating California WaterFix for its impacts on what we call Delta's place, the unique values of the Delta, agricultural, recreational, cultural. And the Commission, I believe, will continue to have a strong interest in looking at any alterations to California WaterFix and how those would impact the unique Delta values, which, as we like to remind everyone, are part of the co-equal goals, usually the part that gets
Left off.
forgotten, and with the focus on water supply reliability and restoration of the Delta. But the co-equal goals do require those to be completed with regard to the unique values of the Delta as an evolving place. So the Commission, I believe, will continue to evaluate the twists and turns in California WaterFix with an eye toward how that proposal will impact those unique Delta values.
All right. Elio, do you have a comment at all?
No concerns with the proposal.
All right. Is there, the recommendation is approve as proposed. Is there a motion? Yes, question, of course.
I want to say Eric, but Mr. Vink, what do you interpret co-equal goals to mean now, pursuant to the 2009 water plan, the new water plan? What does co-equal, what are we meaning equal to what? Equal, what's
well,
equal to what?
Senator Nielsen, I think what the Commission, or the spin that the Commission would put on it is, at least in the context of water supply reliability, that's not just addressing exporters from the Delta, but it's the people and the urban areas within the Delta region that rely upon a sufficient quality of water to enable continued agriculture in the Delta, that the urban in Delta water users rely upon to serve their customers. So I'm not sure if this is specifically answering your question, but we always like to remind everyone that water supply reliability is not just a term that relates to exporters south of the Delta, but to those who rely upon water from the Delta within the region itself, and that water has to be of sufficient quality to enable continued farming and to serve those urban customers.
Well, let me allow you, and I call you my friend, a little different perspective. And I speak as one who spent thousands of hours, literally, in '09, negotiating on that water plan. And it is not the Stewardship Council to interpret. It was the legislature that made the determination for co-equal goals. And one of the problems, in my opinion, we've had over decades in water policy is everything about water in California became Delta-centric. And I speak as a Delta senator. But everything was about the Delta, to the extent that we didn't pay as much heed to the north, to the south, and little at all to the east and west of water in this state. And it was a recognition that the Delta is the heart of water, but there was a lot more that we were dealing with. So co-equal was to take that into account, and to also to assert that humans had a water right in California, another point that had been diminished. So I really want to take that into account. The co-equal goals just did not center on the people who lived in the Delta. It was the people of California, north, south, central, and east and west. And that's one of the concerns that, you know, continues to nag at me. And as we move ahead, it is important that future water policy pursuant to that 09 Act does not continue to be Delta-centric. Delta accommodating, Delta sensitive, absolutely. But water is a lot more in California than the Delta.
All right, let's look at the recommendation, and that is for a one-time general fund increase of $150,000. The staff recommendation is to approve as proposed. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved by Senator Pavley. Any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, please call the roll.
Senators Wolk,
Aye.
Senator Nielsen? No. Senator Pavley?
Aye.
That is approved, 2-1. Let us return to the item on page 16. We have, this was the recommendation for the Delta, of the Delta Stewardship Council, the science program, and Delta plan updates. Please call the absent members.
One quick comment on just
Sure.
going through this again, just acknowledging that the California Environmental License Plate Fund is being used, which I'm not sure that was the intended purpose when people buy these plates, to be spread around in all these different agencies and putting together. This is a worthwhile program. I'm supporting this today, but I think if it's not general fund, then who are the beneficiaries and who else should be paying for it? Should someone who buys a plate for Tahoe or in San Diego for coastal protection be funding all these different programs throughout the state that may or may not be the intent of the people who pay higher amounts for their license plates?
That's the expenditures for the Delta Protection Commission, and it's an excellent comment. You're correct. So if we could return to the Stewardship Council, which is page 16, there was a motion to approve their science funding and Delta plan updates, and we have the roll open. Would you call the question? Call the absent members.
Senators Wolk, aye. Nielsen, no. Senator Pavley?
Aye.
2-1.
All right, that is approved as